What is going on, my fellow nerds? OperatorOtter here. I hope that you're having a wonderful day and that with this video, it gets just a little bit better. The topic of discussion today is going to be going over the best Necromancer builds we have going into Season 5. And really what I want to discuss is do a little bit of a change. I don't want to do a tier list, and here's the reason why. As a content creator, every single time I have done a tier list, it has been... No! And because of that, I don't want to create a ranking order as to how these builds are going to compare to one another. And to add on top of that, we still don't know what the most influential buffs are going to be to the entire game, and those influential buffs are the bugs, which define the meta every season. So we're not going to talk about that. Instead, what we're going to do is we are going to talk about the builds that we know for sure are going to perform going into Season 5, as well as some potential builds. Potential builds are the builds that we weren't able to thoroughly test in the PTR or have received changes within the most recent patch notes that we actually don't know where they're going to lie here, but they have some potential and they look really cool. So I do want to give a shout out to some of those builds and hopefully something can be made of them. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first build on our guaranteed builds list is going to be Minions. Minions are still very powerful even with the Blighted Nurse. It's a very easy build to play. It's very easy to build. And on top of that, there are new stats coming to uniques like Crown Elysians. Minions doesn't really use any resource, so it can actually benefit from the fact that you're getting all of this damage, as well as Shaco is giving 50% CDR, which could go into Army of the Dead to synergize with something like Unyielding Commanders to still give you a bunch of damage. We also don't know if the Mendeln scaling is actually going to go with the minion scaling or it's going to go with your scaling. And if it goes with the minion scaling, this is going to be a massive buff to allow minions to really compete with the top build that we think is going to happen for this season. The next build on our list is none other than Bone Spear. Bone Spear didn't receive any relevant nerfs. It's still very easy to play and very easy to build, as well as I don't want to go into detail here because I want to respect another content creator's kind of theory crafting that's going on with this. He wants to bring this to light in terms of its details, so I'm going to respect his wishes, but I do want to vaguely talk about, and I have asked his permission to talk about this, so we're okay. Deathless Visage does open up some possibilities to where we can get damage in other places that can really buff the Bone Spear Necromancer pretty decently, so it's going to be rather influential. On top of that, we do have some new unique interactions that can buff Bone Spear to actually do quite a bit more damage than we had in Season 4. So with that, I'm going to leave it there, but Bone Spear is looking pretty good. The next build on our list is going to be Sever. So Sever is one of those builds where every single season is underrated, but it just actually comes out and performs near the end of the season due to one of the content creators that are within my Discord channel that just keeps making it work somehow. The guy's just built different. Don't know how he does it, but he does it. So Sever's actually looking pretty good going into Season 5. We do have some current unique changes that are going to make it work really well. The Crown Elysian interaction, really the question is we know that we can make Crown Elysian work. We just don't know which way we're going to use to support the mana cost that Lucian is going to derive from us. So we're trying to figure out which is going to be the best there, but once we figure it out, Sever's looking pretty hot. On top of that, the Shielding Storm buff that's happening, Sever is going to feel this the most out of all of the Necromancer builds because Sever is really a build that's all about getting in the face of the enemies, and it using Ultimate Shadow with the Bone Storm is really going to make it a super tanky contender and a really good build going into Season 5. And lastly, we have the golden child of the Necromancer going into Season 5, Bone Spirit. Bone Spirit is looking not only to be the strongest build for the Necromancer in Season 5, but also a top contender for just being the best build in the game. The changes to the current uniques that we have, as well as the new uniques that are coming into Season 5, really take the damage of Bone Spirit and throw it over the moon. As well, Bone Spirit has quadratic scaling with Essence and how much damage you're able to deal in terms of its damage calculations, which really make it hit a baseball out into the Andromeda Galaxy. So, Bone Spirit's looking really good. And I do have a friend who is a content creator in my Discord who this is his brainchild. This is his baby. And he will be releasing a video and a guide coming out soon. And when he does, I will make sure to give him credit and flowers to inform you guys everything Bone Spirit and how that build functions. So stay tuned for that one. Okay, so now we're going to get into the potential builds for Season 5, and as I stated before, these are builds that we weren't able to thoroughly test in the PTR, as well as there are changes that are coming with the new patch notes that are too differential for us to really kind of have a conclusive thoughts as to where they're going to lie in terms of comparability to other builds and their functionality. So we want to start first with the new Shademist ShadowBlight. So there's a new aspect that is Shademist, and essentially what it is doing is causing your minions to emanate a stacking dot up to about 3 times is what we theorize here. So if you're able to have 11 minions, you could stack this dot onto a target 33 times, which is a lot of ShadowBlight procs within a second. But on top of that, this also works with Bone Prison because Bone Prison is calculated, or I should say coded, to be minions. So Yeah, it's a weird one. Now, during the PTR, when we combined the minions with the Bone Prison, we had some latency issues with the PTR, and the ShadowBlight procs that we were able to get were actually less than if we just used minions or just used Bone Prison, which is kind of weird, but we're hoping that going into Season 5 with better latency issues, this won't be a problem, but we'll see what happens with that. We did get a ShadowBlight buff in terms of how much damage ShadowBlight is dealing. The build is scaling multiplicatively with dot stacking because that's how ShadowBlight works. The more dot damage that you have, additively it turns into a multiplier, and that is a very strong interaction as well. There are no uniques in this build, which is going to be making it interesting to build, but we do have buff tempers to how dot damage actually is. So we're actually getting a buff to the dot damage tempers, which is also going to increase the amount of damage that ShadowBlight can deal. Next up on the list, we have Blood Surge. Now, Blood Surge is going to be a specialized build. We feel it is going to perform best in Hordes. It still can perform in Nightmare Dungeons and Pits, but we feel it's going to be the best in Hordes because there's a very large area with which you have to deal damage within the Hordes. The arena is pretty big, and Blood Surge has a massive AoE. So we believe that Blood Surge is actually just going to perform best in that scenario. On top of that, we do have a Blood Moon buff that is coming, so the overpower damage is going to be buffed on top of this. As well, we do have some possible Dark Dance interactions. So Dark Dance is a new aspect that states that when you're above 60% health, instead of your skills costing resource, they're going to cost life instead. We don't know how this is going to interact with Ring of Starless Skies or Crown of Lucion, but if it's a negative where, oh, you're costing life instead of resource, so it's just not going to do anything on the Ring of Starless Skies, it's going to be an interesting one. But if it does, this is going to be pretty good because the drain from multiple enemies is going to heal back the amount of life that you're draining per cast, and this could give you a very powerful multiplier. And like I said, this is going to be a specialized build for Hordes. We still think it could perform in Nightmare Dungeons and Pits, but we do believe that it's going to perform very, very well for the Hordes coming in Season 5. And lastly, for our potential builds, we have Bloodwave. Bloodwave is receiving a big base damage buff by a multitude of 3. It is literally going to do 3 times more damage than it was doing in previous seasons, so that's a big buff just in itself. We are also getting a Blood Moon buff, so the Blood Moon pants are going to give more overpowered damage. We also have the Shaco buff, so this is going to give us more ultimate cooldown because Shaco can give 50% cooldown reduction. You can also get cooldown reduction in other things, and if you scale this with aspect of Fast Blood with the fact that Bloodwave can create 3 blood orbs per, this means you can really kind of permanently keep casting Bloodwave, and it's going to do a massive amount of damage, so Bloodwave is looking very good there. We also have some Paragon buffs in terms of the Bloodbath legendary node and the Blood Begets Blood legendary node, which are both going to be buffed. So Bloodwave is looking really good in terms of the damage that it can deal. I actually have some pretty high hopes for this one. Bloodwave is looking very good, so we'll see what happens with that one, but Bloodwave could be a pretty top contender for being a top performing build as well. And that brings us to the conclusion of this video. I do want to give a shout out to a bunch of the theory crafters out there in the community that we have in terms of who was able to kind of contribute to this video. I do want to also give you guys access to their content and to their build lists as well. So there will be in the description below a link that will take you to each of their content pages so that you can help support them and help support the community as a whole. There is a Discord link in the channel below as well if you're interested in coming into the Discord and talking with any of these content creators or myself as to what you think are going to be good for the Necromancer. So go ahead and check that out. If you liked the video, make sure to drop that like. Let me know in the comments section what you believe you're going to be going for, what you think is going to be strong. I'd love to be able to talk to you guys in the comments section. And if you feel a little bit generous, go ahead and drop that subscribe to be notified on future videos coming. That's all I have for you. Operator Otter,